네, 여러분 안녕하십니까? 저는 2018 지식서비스 국제 컨퍼런스의 사회를 맡은 아나운서 이연아입니다. 반갑습니다. 네, 먼저 오늘 행사에 뜨거운 관심을 가지고 참석해 주신 내빈 여러분과 참석자 여러분께 다시 한번 감사의 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 그럼 지금부터 산업통상자원부가 주최하고 정보통신산업진흥원이 주관하는 2018 지식서비스 국제 컨퍼런스에 막을 올리겠습니다. IBM의 앙슈만 뎁 이사님께서 AI in Context of Knowledge Intensive Healthcare Services라는 주제로 여러분들에게 유익한 강연 해주시겠습니다. 앙슈만 뎁 이사님을 무대로 모시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Hello everyone. My name is Angshuman Deb. I'm an executive architect with IBM Watson Health. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. This is my second time in this wonderful city, and I absolutely love being here. So today I'm here to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, in the context of healthcare. Now, healthcare and life sciences, and throughout the presentation when I will talk about healthcare, I also mean the life sciences industry. So healthcare and life sciences has been an industry that's primarily driven by human knowledge and human excellence. Be it a doctor who's trying to diagnose a patient, or a clinical researcher who's trying to discover a new drug, their success depends upon their ability to analyze huge amount of information, to discover new concepts, new ideas, and link it to what they already know, and use that to answer specific questions. Now, in this presentation, what I'm going to talk about is the role that artificial intelligence plays in enabling that knowledge worker in the healthcare industry to be more efficient, to discover new frontiers, and transform the industry itself. So, before I go there, a quick disclaimer that views and opinions expressed by me in this presentation are mine and does not necessarily represent IBM's official position on those topics. So I wanted to start this presentation by talking about why AI technologies have become so relevant in the recent years in healthcare and life sciences industry. Healthcare industry has not been averse to adopting new technologies as long as it could prove that it was safe and it produced positive health outcomes for the patient. However, there has been some significant changes in the landscape of overall IT landscape as well as in the healthcare industry that's forcing the industry to look differently at how they can look at new technologies to solve some of the new challenges. And when I talk about new challenges, you can see on the slide, I'm talking about the big data explosion. Over the past decade or so, information is getting produced at a rate that we have never seen before. And a lot of that information is not structured, which means it's not in rows and columns and ordered. It is unstructured, just like how real data, real world is. A lot of it is like medical journals, publications, medical images, genomic sequencing data. So the need of the industry is to have some technology that can analyze this data, synthesize that data, generate knowledge and insights for it, and transform the whole industry. So this is where this information deluge, coupled with the shortage of human expertise to be able to analyze that data, and the promise of AI to analyze information in its natural form, that's what's driving the adoption of AI in healthcare technology. Think of, at a very basic level, if I have some technology that can look at petabytes of PET scan images, and just be able to classify them as something that's regular or routine versus the ones that a human expert needs to take a deeper look at, is a huge productivity benefit in the radiology workflow. That is why AI has become more and more relevant in the healthcare industry over the past decade. And we shouldn't forget what's the price of not knowing in healthcare industry is very different in scale and dimension from any other industry. We shouldn't forget that at the end of everything that we do, there is a patient. The difference between a doctor knowing about a specific clinical trial that's out there that can treat a very rare form of disease, the difference between him knowing that and not knowing that is between life and death for a specific patient. So having the right insight at the right time in the context of right patient is critical in healthcare. And before we dive into what are the different use cases in healthcare that can be transformed using AI technologies, I wanted to take a step back and wanted to make sure that we have a holistic understanding of AI, because it's often very easy to look at other industries and think of AI as just those deep learning algorithms that can analyze, say, retina scan images and accurately classify those people who have diabetic retinopathy. Yes, that is AI. That's a very sophisticated form of AI, and one that's very much suited for that class of problems. But AI is much broader than that. Webster Dictionary defines AI as a branch of computer science that deals with the simulation of intelligent behavior in computers. But what does intelligent behavior in computers mean in the context of healthcare? Well, it could be those deep learning algorithms that I mentioned that learn through a cascading neural net, hierarchical concepts, and discover features and functions, and use that to make some predictions. Or it could be the more traditional form of machine learning, the supervised machine learning, where a human expert feeds the algorithm with a set of relevant features specific to a problem, and then provides that algorithm with labeled data. And the algorithm analyzes the data, finds patterns, correlations, and develops a model to make some predictions. But a computer can demonstrate other forms of intelligent behavior. In the context of healthcare, we should not forget some of the real-life constraints. The deep learning algorithms, the machine learning algorithms that I talked about, they rely upon the availability of a lot of labeled training data. Labeled training data that they can analyze and generate models out of. However, what about those use cases in healthcare where we do not have enough data, but we have decades of knowledge and experience that are codified in the form of ontologies, dictionaries, rule sets? Well, we can leverage that knowledge. We can build AI systems that can take advantage of the knowledge. We can build expert systems, rules-based systems that solve specific problems and can be used to automate a lot of tasks in the healthcare industry or provide best practices on, how, for example, how to treat a specific patient. And in its very basic form, AI technologies could be technologies that can mine huge amounts of data, perform basic descriptive analytics, and through intuitive visualization techniques, bring hidden insights or patterns in the huge amount of data. I mean, for example, think about technologies that can accept patient attributes. For example, when I say patient attributes, I mean, say, demography data, my family history, my current and past medical conditions, maybe my medications, lab values, and use all of that information to go and mine a huge repository, say, of millions of patients' data, and find out which are those patients who are clinically similar to me. And then, through interactive visualizations, bring up how these patients who are similar to me were treated in the past. What were the different lines of therapies that were tried on them? What were the outcomes? Now, that's basic descriptive analytics, data mining, and visualization. But to a doctor treating a patient, that's of enormous value, because now he's providing treatment recommendations that are based on evidence from real-world data. So the point is, AI is not a one-trick pony. AI is a toolbox, and there are different tools in there. And when selecting a specific AI technology to solve a problem, we should take into account the real-life constraints that apply and then use that to select a specific AI technology. So now that we have a more holistic understanding of what AI means, let's talk about how we can apply AI technologies in the healthcare and what are some of the key considerations. And the reason I want to talk about that is because healthcare industry is different from other industries. So some of the constraints that you might not have found in other industries, you are definitely going to find in healthcare industry. For example, healthcare industry is a highly regulated industry, and for the right reasons. It's a person's life that is at stake. So when we are applying AI technologies to solve critical use cases in healthcare, for example, diagnosing a patient or providing a treatment recommendation, that has to go through the same rigorous validation process that a new drug or a new medical device would have to go to before being introduced in the market. And there it becomes the question of trust and transparency in AI. A lot of the deep learning algorithms that I talked about, they do an excellent job in making predictions and answering questions just based on patterns in the data. However, they struggle, they find it very difficult to explain on how they arrived at that conclusion. Now in healthcare industry, where a decision taken by a human expert could mean life and death for a patient, the expert would not only need to know what, but also understand why and how that algorithm arrived at that conclusion. So moving away from black box AI into glass box AI, where a human expert can understand the rationale in a way that humanly understandable form, and then begin trusting that algorithm. The second aspect is in which the healthcare industry is different from others is, here we have decades of investments in building up ontologies, in building up rule sets, in best practice guidelines. So we might not need to start from scratch by just looking at data and trying to understand what patterns, what signals they provide. We have expertise, we have knowledge. We should use what we know and then go and look into data for additional insights. Also, a lot of the learning algorithms or the rules-based expert systems, the way they are built and trained is by human subject matter experts, by human experts who either identify features relevant to that specific problem area and provide labeled training data or provide established rules. Now, healthcare in real life is very complex. I mean, when you look at how specific patients are treated, you would see a lot of variability. A lot of variability from one institution to another institution, from one country to another country, from one part of the world to another part of the world. And these variations are based on local guidelines, regulatory compliance requirements, sometimes implicit bias or best practices. So when we are using AI, when we are building or training AI technologies based on features and data that was prepared by a human expert, we need to acknowledge that the recommendations provided by those AI technologies might not be universal in nature, because they are built on data and expertise that was provided by human experts. And then when we talk about, this is one of the constraints I touched upon earlier, right? When we look at machine learning algorithms, deep learning algorithms, and we look at broad disease areas like breast cancer or lung cancer, we might have a lot of training data. But when you look at subspecialties, for example, if you're trying to build an algorithm to treat or to diagnose non-small cell lung cancer, a very rare condition, you might not have enough data to build that model. So you'll have to come up with approaches on how to build that training data. And then finally, two critical factors that are often underestimated in building AI technologies in healthcare. One is data, the quality of data. When I say data, it's not just any data. It's data that can be consumed by that algorithm. So often what happens is we bring in data from multiple institutions, multiple sources, each of them having their own terminologies, own dictionaries, own units, and they don't talk to each other. We should not underestimate the amount of time the amount of effort, human subject matter expertise required to cleanse that data, to normalize that data, to make it usable, to train a machine learning algorithm. And in the same breath, I would say we should not underestimate the human subject matter expertise, the effort and the time that is required, say for example, from your top oncologist to train and validate a machine learning algorithm to treat specific type of cancer. It's easy to underestimate that. There's a lot of human effort that goes in building machine learning algorithms. So those are some of the key considerations of applying AI technologies in healthcare, and some of them are very unique and very specific to this industry. So what does AI mean in healthcare, in the context of healthcare industry? From what I just presented, I hope you would agree that AI in healthcare is all about augmenting human intelligence. It's about making the human expert more efficient, helping him take better decisions that are backed by data, backed by evidence. And it's not about replacing that human actor or that human subject matter expert. Considering the strong regulatory compliance requirements and the price that you have to pay for a wrong decision, AI technologies in healthcare, at least for the near foreseeable future, is not going to replace the human experts. So in the next section of the presentation, I'm going to talk about some real applications of AI. AI technologies in healthcare has moved beyond the research labs, beyond experiments into mainstream applications. And in the next section, I'm going to talk about some of those, and I've tried to classify them under 4 broad categories. First is AI technologies to optimize the drug development cycle. Then AI technologies to treat or to diagnose patients' diseases. Then AI technologies that are being used to optimize some of the back office workflows in hospital systems or pharmaceutical industry. And then a bunch of mixed bag AI use cases, which is difficult to put under one common theme, and I've put them in a separate category of their own. So let's talk about application of AI in the drug development cycle. This is one area where there is a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of work going on in applying AI to transform the way we develop drugs today, the way we bring drugs to the market. Many of you would know that the current drug development process is very expensive and takes a long time. I think there was a study in 2016 where they found out that the total anticipated cost to bring a single drug to market is over $2.6 billion. That's billion with a B. And it takes over 10 years. So naturally, pharma companies are looking at adopting different technologies to optimize different parts of this drug development cycle. And one area that's of key focus and interest for AI technology developers is the initial clinical research and the drug discovery phase of the development cycle. The initial clinical research and the drug development and the drug discovery portion of the drug development cycle is a very knowledge-driven process today. It's a very knowledge-driven, expertise-driven process today. A researcher would go through many, many pages of scientific journals, past clinical study results, any scientific journal that has come about talking about an area that's similar to the area of his research. You'd have to go through all of those information, process all of that information, generate new insights, and then see how it applies to his study. What they need to transform this process are AI technologies that can analyze data in their natural forms. So be it a transcript from a conference like this, or a scientific journal, or oncology database, or prior clinical experiments, results from clinical experiments. They need AI technologies that can analyze all of those information, discover concepts, and how they link to what is already known about that area in the clinical domain, and use interactive visualization to bring that up so that the researcher can quickly connect the dots, come up with new hypotheses, and accelerate his research of developing a new drug that's targeted to a specific gene or protein or a specific disease. or for that matter, repurpose existing drug combinations to target towards new diseases. They need that kind of AI technology. And I'm going to talk about Watson for Drug Discovery, which is an AI technology from IBM Watson Health that does exactly that. Watson for Drug Discovery is trained in specific biological concepts like genes or proteins, drugs, or diseases. Now, it can analyze huge quantities of information, structured data, unstructured data in the form of, as I already talked about, textual information from medical journals, millions and millions of abstracts. And it can bring about the relationships between these entities. So what is the affinity of a specific compound on a specific protein? Or how is a specific protein linked to progression of a specific disease? It can discover all of these from the knowledge sources and bring it up to an interactive visualization, predict specific areas of interest where the researchers should dive deeper into based on the commonality of the attributes between the biological concepts, and accelerate the drug development, the drug discovery process for that specific researcher. Watson for Drug Discovery has been used by many, many pharma institutions across the world. There are a lot of success stories, but the one that I wanted to talk about today is from the Barrow Neurological Institute in Arizona. So Barrow wanted to use Watson for Drug Discovery to figure out if there are unidentified RNA-binding proteins that are linked to the ALS disease. ALS disease is a motor neuron disease where the death of the motor neurons leaves the patient disabled, and scientists don't fully understand what are all the proteins that are involved or the genes that are involved in that process. Leveraging Watson for Drug Discovery, the researchers at Barrow Institute were able to find 5 never previously linked proteins that they found to be altered in a person with ALS. Now that's years of worth of research. Using a cognitive technology, using an AI technology like Watson for Drug Discovery, it was able to bring up those insights in a matter of weeks instead of years. So that's an example of an AI technology that is being used in mainline pharmaceutical industry to accelerate the drug discovery. The next class of AI solutions I wanted to talk about are the ones that are being used for treatment recommendations and disease diagnostics. Now, this is probably the most crowded space in healthcare AI, where there are established AI technology players. They are competing for space with healthcare startups. And when I looked at the different kind of applications, AI technologies that are available in this area, you can broadly classify them under 2 basic functions, and they're often interrelated. The first is to develop a holistic understanding of the patient by analyzing petabytes of data about that patient. For example, looking at medical images, looking at pathology reports, radiology reports, progress reports from doctors, which are all in natural text, which has never been possible to analyze using traditional computing methods. So to analyze all of that structured and unstructured information about the patient, to create a holistic understanding of the patient, of every clinical attribute about that patient. And then the second class of applications which leverage this knowledge and then being trained on a specific disease domain is able to either diagnose a specific condition, or when trained by experts, they can provide treatment recommendations or find matching clinical trials for that patient. So if you look at the AI, or as I mentioned, there are a lot of players in this space, but if you look at the space as a whole, you would see AI technologies being broadly classified into these 2 functions. And I'm going to talk about Watson for Genomics, which probably does both. So when molecular sequence data is uploaded into Watson for Genomics, molecular sequence data from tumor DNA is uploaded into Watson for Genomics. Watson for Genomics leverages its deep understanding of how genetic mutations happen. And then it goes back to his extensive knowledge base of over 20 plus content sources, publications, journals, oncology databases, drug databases, to create a summary of the tumor profile, identifying the most likely mutations that is driving the cancer in that patient. So a patient might have 2,000 mutations, but which are the driver mutations? It can identify those driver mutations, identify the type of alterations that has happened, and then it can suggest standard of care therapies or clinical trials that are targeted towards those specific mutations. So it does the interpretation of the genomic sequencing data as well as provide treatment recommendation. It's being used in hospitals across the world, and one such success story I think that came out last year was from Japan, where there was a 60-year-old woman who was suffering from acute myeloid leukemia, which is a rare form of blood cancer. And even after several rounds of chemotherapy, the doctors at University of Tokyo were not seeing much progress in the disease condition. That is when they turned into Watson for Genomics, and Watson for Genomics analyzed the genomic sequencing data for this patient and correctly identified the driver mutations. And when the patient was treated with the recommended drugs for those targeted towards those specific mutations, her condition improved and she was cured. So Watson for Genomics is an AI application that's being used in the space of treatment recommendation for patients with cancer. The next category of AI applications that I wanted to talk about are the ones that are being used for operational efficiencies in the back office workflows in the clinical systems. Now, it's difficult to classify them under specific groups because, for example, in population health management, health networks are using AI technologies to mine huge population databases to identify or predict who are those people who are at the highest risk for a specific disease, for example, diabetes or heart conditions. They're using AI technologies to predict and identify those patient cohorts so that they can go and define targeted outreach programs to reach out to these patients, provide interventions to improve their health outcomes. In value-based care, health networks are using AI technologies to measure their performance. For example, how am I treating patients with heart conditions? Or how am I able to reduce readmissions for patients with certain conditions? They're using AI technologies to measure their performance and compare with industry benchmarks. One area which has significantly transformed the back office operations in healthcare is voice to text. And it has worked like magic. I mean, instead of doctors now sitting in front of computers and entering data, voice to text automatically transcribes their voice there, so they do not have to go and type in the data, maybe a pathology report or a clinical progress report. That's a great time saving. They're spending more time with the patient. But one area where I wanted to touch upon where AI is and can make a big difference is the clinical trial office in a health institution. In a clinical trial office in any large health institution, there would be a clinical trial coordinator. And his or her responsibility is to scan the entire patient population within the network and then identify who are those people who could be eligible for this specific trial that's running in that institution. Now, finding patients for a trial is an extremely difficult task. The reason is clinical trials, the clinical trial protocols, they have strict eligibility criteria, inclusion and exclusion criteria, which essentially are clinical attributes that make a patient eligible or ineligible for a specific trial. Now, these trial criteria are written in rich, natural text. They have complex clinical criteria, clinical conditions defined in them. And as with any natural text, they will have things like abbreviation, partial sentences or phrases. double duplicates or double negatives. So it's very difficult for someone to analyze all of those conditions, correlate them, and figure out, okay, these are the discrete set of inclusion criteria, and these are the exclusion criteria. And not only that, then go and look into each of patients, because we don't know which patient might be eligible or not. You have to go and look into each patient, and that patient data might be unstructured and might be petabytes of data. Right? You can go and look for those specific clinical attributes to figure out, does this patient meet all the inclusion criteria, and does he not violate any of the exclusion criteria? Is an extremely difficult task to complete. And the result is evident when you look at the industry. You see over here, over 35% of the participating sites in clinical trials, they fail to meet their agreed upon patient enrollment numbers, with over 10% of sites even failing to recruit a single patient. But that's a big loss, because a lot of these trials could have become drugs that could save the lives of thousands of people if we were able to somehow make this process more automated using new technologies. And that's where Watson for clinical trial matching comes in. It has the capability of analyzing clinical trials, analyzing the inclusion-exclusion criteria from the rich natural language text, extract those key clinical concepts and their relationships, and then match them against the patient's data, and come up with a list of trials that this patient could be eligible for, or in the reverse workflow, in the clinical trials office, continuously scan and monitor the patient's data to see which of those patients has become eligible for a specific trial that's open in that institution. Watson for clinical trial matching has been deployed in many hospitals. And in one recent study, I think it came out in March this year, was from Mayo Clinic, who are using this in their clinical workflow for breast cancer patients. They reported an increase of over 80% in the patient enrollment numbers for breast cancer upon the introduction of Watson for clinical trial matching. So Watson for clinical trial matching is an example of an AI solution that increases the efficiency of the clinical trial office. Then the last category is a collection of different AI technologies that's difficult to put under one theme. So the first of this is the robot-assisted surgeries, so AI-powered robotic surgical assistants. This is becoming quite mainstream these days because there's a drive to reduce variability in surgical procedures. And I remember reading about a specific case study. This is from the Maastricht University Medical Center in Netherlands, where they used AI-powered robotic surgery platform to perform stitches on tiny blood vessels that are so small that it's difficult for human experts to achieve the desired accuracy and consistency. So they built this AI-powered robotic surgery platform where it was a surgeon who was controlling that machine. But the AI-powered solution was converting the surgeon's hand movements into much more smaller and much more precise movements using the robotic hands. And not only that, it used AI techniques to stabilize any tremors in the surgeon's hand movements. Then the next category are the consumer-facing, what I call virtual advisors. These increase patient engagement and often induce behavioral changes. But there are different flavors of those. For example, there are nursing assistants, which are usually used in post-operative care. So the patient, after he comes from an operation or a surgical procedure, can ask questions in the recovery period. They can ask questions on how to take care of themselves, what exercises to perform, what not to do. So they can ask questions and get guidance from virtual nurse assistants. That is in their mobile app all the time, 24/7. They have access to that information. Then there's a bunch of applications that we call them like wellness advisors or fitness coaches. They gather information about the consumer, what I'm eating, how much I'm sleeping, how much I'm climbing the steps. And they use all of that information to create a holistic understanding of the patient. And then using AI techniques and gamification techniques, gamification has become big in this area. They increase patients' engagement, first of all, and then they induce behavioral changes for positive health outcomes. And then there are benefit advisors, and there's an example for Watson Assistant for health benefits. So what this does is it provides answers to commonly asked questions that people have around their health benefits and their eligibility. So they can ask questions, get answers to what are the kind of services that I'm eligible for, what is the out-of-pocket pay, what is the co-pay. And not only that, it also leverages AI techniques to suggest what is that optimal plan for you based on your past consumption. So how have you utilized healthcare services in the past? Use that information to tell you what's the right plan for you. And then there are other emerging areas in insurance, in health insurance, for example, using AI for automatic medical coding, and then fraud detection, which is a big problem in insurance claims. So those are some of the other emerging areas of AI applications in healthcare. So I hope from what I presented, you have an understanding, a holistic understanding of what AI means in the context of healthcare. We talked about the big data explosion and how information is growing at a scale that's becoming impossible for humans to process that information. We talked about the promise of AI technologies to be able to analyze that data, to harness knowledge and insights from structured and unstructured data in their natural form. We talked about a broader view of AI beyond just deep learning algorithms. AI is a toolbox, and when selecting a specific AI technology, we need to keep in mind the key considerations, the key constraints that apply to that specific class of problems. We talked about specific considerations of applying AI technologies in healthcare, very different from any other industry. And then we talked about several examples of AI technologies that are used in mainstream clinical workflows. So AI is out of the research domain now into real application in the healthcare domain. And then finally, I would like to leave you with this message that in healthcare, AI is augmenting human intelligence, is enabling him to take better decisions. In a highly regulated industry like healthcare, where a wrong decision can lead to life and death of a patient, at least for the near foreseeable future, AI technologies will not be replacing the knowledge workers, the human experts in this industry. It will help them take better decisions. It will scale their expertise. It will help them with knowledge and insights from huge amounts of data, but it will not be able to replace the knowledge, the belief, the passion of these knowledge workers in the healthcare industry. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deb, for your informative presentation. 네, 오늘 좋은 강연 들려주셨습니다. AI가 헬스케어에서 실제로 어떻게 사용되는지 잘 알아볼 수 있었습니다. 이렇게 서비스 산업이 혁신이 진행이 되어서요, 여러 기업들의 창의력 그리고 활발한 연구 개발 또 다양한 성공 사례를 통해서 새로운 분야에서 생태계가 조성되기 때문에 미래가 참 밝은 것 같습니다.